My name is Drew Waldron, and I am on with futurist and tech entrepreneur Anat Baron. Anat, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Drew, for having me.
So there are so many different facets to your professional life. How do you typically introduce yourself and your career?
Oh my God. I usually just ask people how much time they have, which is kind of funny, but I have one of those eclectic, not eccentric, but eclectic career paths where I definitely have not had a linear path to get to where I am. I've worked in so many different industries. And so, what I say to people today is that I am a futurist and a keynote speaker, and I do those things based on my past, but also based on the fact that I am curious. So it's never the same. I wish that I could say I'm a doctor or a lawyer, but I'm neither of those things. And so it is harder to describe. So it depends on the setting. So not exactly the answer maybe that you were looking for, but maybe tells you a little bit about me. I'm not complicated, but I would say maybe a little complex.
We're at the beginning of 25, and you work in the tech world. You're very familiar with a lot of the different developments we have, AI and otherwise. What do you think be the major tech advancements that define 2025?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think, if I'm completely honest, it is very hard to predict the future, and futurists don't actually make predictions per se. So, what we do is we look at the signals. I can say that the world is going to look very different by the end of 2025, meaning that AI, which right now people are still playing with, they're not sure about, is going to be everywhere. And most organizations are already going to be implementing it. If the last 2 years were kind of about experimentation and introduction, it is going to be the first year where we're going to see it start to seep through most things that we do, both at work and even in our personal lives. So things like agents and avatars, we're going to hear more and more about that. And they, like I said, are going to be part of our lives by the end of the year. And I know it's hard to imagine, but it was really hard to imagine self-driving cars, and they're here. I live in Los Angeles. The other day, just to give you a quick story, I was leaving my garage, sitting in my car, and I was blocked by a Waymo, which is a self-driving car. Now, what do you do when you are blocked by a car with no driver? And it was at that moment, after honking and screaming at it and realizing that there's nothing I can do to get it to move, that I realized that this future that we've been hearing about and thinking about and talking about for years had literally arrived in my driveway. And I think that's what this coming year and the next few years, maybe the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to see so much change. It's hard for us to get our heads around at this moment in time.
It feels a little dystopian, does not?
So I used to work in Hollywood, and for years, Hollywood has made dystopian films. Our whole world, when we think about AI and robots, really revolves around the dystopian Hollywood movies that we've seen, especially in the last 20, 30 years. I always like to go back to a show that I love, which is The Jetsons, where in the 1960s, in the very early 1960s, when writers thought about the future, they thought about how robots and technology could add value to our lives and how they can make our lives better. And it's very curious to me that in the last few years, when Hollywood is making films, they're all about fear, right? We are supposed to be afraid of the AI. It's going to kill us all. The robots are going to get us. It's the end of the world and dystopian. I think that one of the ways to look at the future is to not so much decide about your view of the future, because we really, as individuals, don't have much control of which world we're moving into. But I do think that if we can, as humans, think about technology and AI in particular as something positive and think about how it's going to help humanity. For example, I think the medical advances that we're going to see in the next few years are going to be incredible. The biotech, even climate change, technology can help us in so many ways. And so a lot of it is our own mindset and how we as individuals, as society, as governments look at what it can do in a positive way, whether continuously pushing this narrative that it's just going to kill us all. Because if that's the case, then I'm just going to have cake for lunch.
Very, very well said. I try to view everything on the spectrum of Jetsons to Terminator. When you're working with all these different companies, you're a keynote speaker, you meet all these different business leaders. When you're talking to business leaders that are trying to utilize new technology like AI, what do you find are some of the biggest challenges they're facing, and what advice do you give them?
I think, again, there is fear anytime there's something new. And I think for leaders, you're constantly managing. And as someone who's run companies in the past as well, whether they're mine or someone else's, I think that the constant challenge is how do you deal with the status quo, right? Like you have employees, you have budgets, you have investors, you have to make money, you have to make your customers happy, you have to make your employees happy. That's a tall order for any organization, whether it's one person or 100,000 people. It doesn't really matter. Now you have this idea of having to look forward, and people think that new technology is something that we're only dealing with now. The reality is there has always been new technology. Even the fax machine in its day was new technology. I know some people don't know what that is. Look it up. But I think that what we need to do as leaders is look at, okay, how do I keep my business going? But then how do I make sure that it's still going to exist a year, 2, 5, 10 down the line? And we have seen, and there's so many examples, of companies that have gone away that were huge. I always go back to because I was in the film industry, like Blockbuster and Netflix. I had a film on Netflix. I was one of the first independent filmmakers to have a film on Netflix on streaming back in, I want to say 2010. And people told me I was crazy. They had bought 5,000 DVDs back in 2009. And then they were like, we're starting this streaming thing. And people were like, what are you wasting your time with? And so things are moving really fast. And if you are running any sort of organization today, you certainly cannot be only focused on the status quo. You have to look ahead and you have to figure out not just like, oh, how do I just bring AI? Like that is so amorphous. The question is, how do I reinvent my organization to meet the time? And what that means is basically is that AI, like the internet in its time, the internet is now used by every single organization, almost every single person on earth. AI is going to be the same thing. It's going to become almost like infrastructure, if you will, and it's just going to sit underneath everything. And so the question isn't, do I want to use it, or how do we want to use it, or let's slow down. The question should be, how do we integrate it? How do we look at our entire organization and figure out how to move into this transformational time? And we are already in it. So what I try to do is light a fire under people's, I'm trying to think of the right word, behinds, is that the proper word? So that they realize that the time is now and that you can't just sit around and wait for this thing to develop. It's here. It's not going anywhere. It is going to be one of the biggest changes in our lifetimes and for humanity ever.
Painting, the theoretical blockbuster that says that the streaming industry will never catch on. I think that really helps to paint it in a really interesting light. When you're giving all these talks about new technology, and it doesn't have to just be about AI, as you're giving all these talks to all these different audiences about new technology, what do you want the biggest takeaways to be from your audience? Like, what do you try to have audience walking out of the theater thinking?
I want them to feel like they have agency, number one. I think that what's happening is we are bombarded with so much information as individuals, and individuals are what makes up every single person that's sitting in an audience, right? They're an individual. They may work for a company. They may work for themselves, but we are just constantly bombarded by information from every single side. And so what I want them to realize is the technology isn't there to take their jobs away. Although, let's be clear, some jobs will go away. And I will say it here just so that I'm 100% clear. If your job can be done by a robot, your job will be done by a robot. And so if you are a translator or if you're in customer service, you may want to start thinking about a new career for yourself. I also want to remind people that they have agency in that there are going to be new jobs created. And so not to think so much in such a linear way. I'm a walking example of having a nonlinear career path, but to really think about how they can adopt and bring AI and technology into their job, how to transform their job using AI and any other new technologies. But mostly today it's AI. And I want them to feel empowered to do so. And so that comes from the person themselves. And I also, while I'm saying all of this, I'm telling the organizations to open up the way that they work and to look for their employees and coworkers to adopt all of these new tools, because that's what they are right now. For me, the biggest question that I want people to think about is, what can I do to stay relevant, right? That's what we should all be asking all the time, right? And if you stay relevant and you're using technology to make your job easier or to give yourself more time, that's the other thing that we don't talk about. If parts of your job are being taken over by an AI or an agent or using an avatar or a million different things that you can do today to make things easier and to make at least some tasks doable by technology, then you have more time to do the things that make us uniquely human, which is you can be curious and ask questions and solve problems and be creative. These are things the machines, and let's be very clear, as much as I still say please and thank you when I go to any of the large language models that I use, whether it's Perplexity or Claude or ChatGPT, they're made to seem human, but let's be very clear that we're talking to machines. So the one thing that long-winded response to your question, the one thing that I want people to leave with is this idea that we as humans should use the best of our humanity in what we do. And what that means is utilizing and looking at AI in particular as a tool that can make our lives better, and not as this fearful thing to shun away from.
Anat, aside from technological trends, what are some consumer trends that you see moving forward into 2025 that you think are going to have a big impact?
So I think if we look forward after this year of so much change in the world, I think that 2025 in particular is going to see a lot of the trends that have started because of some new technology, but also because of the state of the world. So my advice to anyone who is looking forward, first of all, is to buckle up. I think that this year, both from geopolitics, politics, the economy is going to be extremely tumultuous. And not just in the United States, but I think around the world. I think we're seeing it in so many ways. And obviously that has impact on the consumer. But ultimately, I think what we're going to see in 2025 in particular is that everything that has come before, from consumer trends meeting technology. So for example, the ability that we have now to do everything through a mobile device, right? That never existed before. So this on demand, what that has created is a desire from the consumer to have personalized experiences. So we're going to see this confluence of on demand everything, right? Meet the idea that we no longer have any sort of differentiation between our personal lives and our business lives, right? We're on all the time. And so what we're going to see from organizations is more hyper personalization when it comes to me, the consumer. Today, we have the consumer at the center of everything. We never had that before because we couldn't have that before. And so this idea that there's going to be mass marketing and that's going to work, that's going to go slowly away. That's why you're seeing so much change in the advertising business. And so we're going to have organizations, companies try to literally talk to me directly and give me offers that pertain only to me. They're going to try to get to know me better. And so that is going to continue, and we're going to see that. And that's coming from both consumers, employees, right? The more technology we have, the more we're missing the interpersonal connection and this experience feeling that somebody is talking to me directly. And so we're going to see this sea change from mass marketing, which we've seen for years, go more and more into this direct to me. I'm at the center of the universe. Give me offers that are specific to me. Try to know me. And that's going to be helped, by the way, by these agents. So that when I want to book travel, for example, the agent, the AI agent, so going back to technology, which everything is technology these days, right? We're going to be able to tell the agent that we want to go on a trip, and it's going to know everything about me, where I like to sit on the plane, what kind of hotel I like, and I won't have to do any of that. That's part of this personalization. So we're going to have to get used to a new way of interacting in the world, both with the companies that we already work with and with companies that want to reach us.
Oh my gosh, until you put it into words, it's hard to articulate and really conceptualize how much advertising has changed in the last 10 years, specifically for a for you algorithmic world.
It's going to be fascinating. I really think that people have no idea of how quickly things are going to change. And it's, again, a conflict. It's not just AI, it's AI and technology and consumer demands and the world around us and the political situation around the world and geopolitics. It's going to be bumpy. I will say that and stand by it. It just can't be. That's what happens in times of transformational change. It's not a straight line. And so I also, from a positive standpoint, to go back to your dystopia question, want to say that I think that so much is in how we think about it, in our mindset. But I believe that this is the most exciting time to be human and to be alive. We are literally seeing a sea change in how the world works, right? I say this in my talks that we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, right? So it is an incredible time if you can take yourself out of your day-to-day world and whatever you're trying to do, whether it's to park your car, to buy groceries, or to get a task done at work, and you actually go up to 35,000 feet and look down and think about the world that we're in. It's amazing and it's super exciting. And I think if we take a look at it that way, and if we participate in it in that way, and we're constantly asking the questions, the curiosity factor, I think we together, it's not one person, we as humans can really create an amazing world that we saw back in the Jetsons, right? If we just stop thinking about the fact that it's all over, because again, if that's the case, what are we doing? And so we should all be wanting to contribute and collaborate at this exciting time for the world.
Anat, it's been great getting to talk to you and getting to know you. And we always end on this one question, and I would love to hear what you have to say. What advice do you have for young people?
My advice is to always, always say yes first, because you can always say no later. And that's really what I have followed throughout my career. People ask me if I want to take on this new role, or if I want to try this new technology tool, or if I want to go on TV, whatever that is, I've always just said yes and then figured it out. And that is, to me, a way to live a fearless life and to not be so stuck in what you think you know or what you understand. It's really just about breaking out of whatever you have told yourself is the norm or what everyone's pushing you to do, and really exploring. So my number one tip, if you will, for young people, and actually for all people, is to be curious. That has been my superpower, if you will, if I had to pick one, is just to look at the world around you and ask more questions and then get to the answers.
Excellent. And one more question that I want to tack on at the end here, because I am so fascinated that you got your start in creative industry like the film industry. What is the biggest lesson from that creative field that you have brought with you to your work as a keynote speaker and a futurist? Those are also creative fields, but what from the filmmaking industry has stuck with you today?
I think throughout my career, it has always been about storytelling. And so even when I've run a hotel company or a beverage company or my own startups. I think everything is about telling stories, whether it's to consumers, to your own employees. And especially in Hollywood, what you realize is that there are actual ways to tell a story. And, there are 3 acts in a movie and 7 acts in a TV movie, and it's very much boxed in. And yet, what I have found is that breaking that mold, taking my own advice about curiosity and doing things a little bit differently has really worked. But it's really ultimately everything is a story. Even this conversation is a story. And so it's finding the ways in which to be memorable, to reach an emotional connection with an audience. That's the key to storytelling, really. And then I think just being able to tell the story in such a way that makes it last.
Everyone loves a story. Well, that is going to conclude our conversation with Anat Baron. Anat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Drew. This was fun.